With Resident Evil 7, Capcom's beloved survival horror franchise took an interesting turn, changing not only from third person to a first person perspective, but also story-wise, it took a well-needed different approach. These changes has been received very positive not only by fans, but also by new players. So no wonder Capcom gives us with that formula the sequel Resident Evil Village and continues the story around our faceless hero Ethan Winters. In this review, I will mention everything you need to know about the game without spoiling anything.
A local tale. Besides,
Resident Evil Village continues 3 years after the events of Resident Evil 7. Ethan and Mia are living the American dream somewhere in Romania and are enjoying family life with their 1-year-old baby Rose. But that peace won't last long. During one night, Chris Redfield storms with BCA elite soldiers the Winters' house, kidnaps Rose, and takes Ethan away. Here is a short introduction of the events with some epic Romanian music. Ethan's transport, however, crashes and he found himself being in a mysterious village that keeps not only Rose as hostage, but also many dangerous creatures.
Take it! Take it!
Like I mentioned before, Resident Evil Village is still a first-person horror survival shooter, but with small and important changes for the better. For example, the new enemy types. This time you will not encounter these boring mold creatures, instead you will find some variation of enemies, from the werewolf-looking lesions, which are quick and can dodge attacks, to the blood-sucking maracas that attacks with the sword and other melee weapons, to the genetic, manipulated super soldaten. With this variety of enemies you will certainly need more firepower. Fortunately, the Duke is introduced to us early. He is our weapon dealer, this time however a little bit bigger than Resident Evil 4.
It's just water weight!
The Duke's shops has a variety of weapons and weapon upgrades, ammo and blueprints to create or healing or explosives. His stock will change over time after progressing through the story with more powerful weapons. Of course, everything has its price, but therefore you can find lei or other valuable items to sell in exchange. The Duke is also a cook. Bringing him ingredients and he will be able to create dish that will affect stats permanently in the game. For example, increase max health and defense boost. To collect the ingredients, which is basically just meat or fish, you have to explore the village. Speaking of, after progressing through some hours, the game lets you explore the mysterious village. The atmosphere and design is awesome. It's like visiting the horror version of Disneyland. The game lets you explore its hidden treasures and secrets at your own pace before continuing the story and confronting the villains, which is absolutely fun. Thankful to the map layout, you keep exploring to find new items, which can be ingredients for dishes, guns, or treasures that can be sold later in Duke's shop for a high price. Of course, buying and collecting so much stuff will need a good inventory management. Fans from Resident Evil 4 will remember this design, and yes, it can be upgraded later in the game for more space. If you decide to continue Ethan's rescue mission and enter one of the villain's areas, you will encounter exquisite horror survival action. There are some puzzles and riddles in between. Nothing too spectacular, nothing too fancy, but it's doing overall a good job to keep the player motivated and curious, because the main focus lies here definitely on the horrifying moments, and trust me, they are terrifying and intense. I won't give you much introduction into the villains, since it's pretty hard to do so without spoiling, but let me just mention the villains in the game are very charismatic and very well designed here. Like fan favorite Lady Dimitrescu, these 9 feet full of charisma will make it impossible to take your eyes off her every time she's on screen.
The entire blood.
That was worth it. That was worth it.
There are some negative points in the game I have to mention. First and foremost, if you play on a standard PS4, be prepared for FPS drops and clipping. Don't get me wrong, it still looks good and it's playable, but it's definitely not smooth. If you play on the PlayStation 4 Pro with performance mode, you don't have to worry about these FPS problems. Be just aware that the clipping issues still stays, even on the PlayStation 5, which I played and finished the game. Luckily, these are very rare and will not have any negative impact on the experience. Now we come into more personal issues with the game. I felt the game, with everything it was presented with, way too short. Yes, you can experience the village a bit more, replay with higher difficulty setting and the mercenary mode, but I mean the overall content in the whole campaign. I was really surprised that Lady TiBrozZ, despite seeing her in every trailer and thinking she might be the main villain, she actually has a very small role. Not going to spoil anything, but after beating the end boss, I kind of wish she would, since the final boss fight was, compared to any other villain, disappointing. Lady TiBrozZ and her 3 daughters took me only 3 hours. The same happened with every villain, so I ended up seeing the credits after 8.5 hours. Every time the game builds this terrifying immersion and intense atmosphere, it immediately throws everything away and takes you to the next section where you experience the same. It's so sad, and I wished I would see more of the villains, since every of them has their unique story. The game feels like a 5-season horror series squeezed together into 8 hours, and probably 6 if you don't explore the village at all and just go for the main story. The game stays pretty much in good balance between survival horror and action until you reach a point somewhere around 2/3 of the game. The game becomes more of a horror shooter, since you'll find not only ammo and items in almost every corner, but also enemies. After the terrifying horror sequences I played through in this game, I kind of wish the game would stay on that course. Resident Evil Village gives you a pure survival horror experience with some unique charming villains. Unfortunately, the story of them comes here too short. Also, with a total playtime including exploration of 8.5 hours, the overall game here felt way too short for my taste. So my final verdict is an 8 out of 10. Resident Evil Village is a must-buy for Resident Evil fans and anyone who likes horror atmosphere games. Mucha thank you for watching, and see you.